was discovered in a legal deed in a cave.
These are Hebraisms that Joseph Smith would never have known about.
And here they are in the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith absolutely, certainly translated the Book of Mormon by the power of God.
I am here with Don Parry, author of Preserved in Translation, and a lot of other books. This is, I can probably attest that this is the narrowest book that you've possibly ever written.
Probably so.
You are a researcher, an author, a professor at BYU. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you've done. I want to make sure we establish, your credibility here.
I teach the Hebrew Bible, which is the Old Testament, but it's in the original language. I studied at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, earned a PhD in the topic, and I've lived in Israel 3 times. I do Hebrew Bible. I research and publish things for scholars and scholarly works in international presses on the Hebrew Bible. It's what I do. It's my job.
You've just said the word Hebrew like 7 times right there. And we're here to talk to you about, if I'm saying this right, Hebraisms.
Yes.
What are Hebraisms, and why would it matter to us on our quest to find evidence for the Book of Mormon?
We're talking about Hebraisms in the Book of Mormon, and Hebraisms are Hebrew-like structures, poetic parallelisms. They are figures of speech or literary techniques, and other Hebrew-like constructions that survive the translation and that are in the Book of Mormon.
This I mentioned this book a minute ago. I read this last night, I'll be honest with you. It is very digestible. I love the way you talk about how it's accessible to lay people like myself. Clearly you could get very detailed and technical, but I loved how I had no idea there were so many Hebraisms in the book. I mean, there's 25 or 30 within this book.
There are 30 categories, and I'm astounded at how many categories there are. 30 categories, 30, and some of the categories present, there are hundreds of one category in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon is filled with Hebraisms.
What are some of your favorite Hebraisms from the Book of Mormon?
A very simple Hebraism is the many ands. And, the conjunction and, is found hundreds of times in the Book of Mormon.
And that's a Hebraism?
It's a Hebraism.
Now, how do you know that? What makes that and sounds like just a regular conjunctive word.
Let's turn to a verse.
Okay.
And I'll just show you the verse.
Okay.
So I'd like to turn to, how about the book of Helaman, chapter 3, verse 14.
Okay.
And it'll just give you an example. 3 verse 14.
By the way, while he's looking this up, here where we are, we do have a copy. We have one of the original Book of Mormon's copy of the Book of Mormon right there from Grandin, the first couple thousand that I'm not even going to look at it.
So here's an example of many ands.
Okay.
And this is not English. In English, I'll read it quickly. So it says, and their wars, I'm just reading part of it,
Okay.
and their wars and contentions and dissensions and their preaching and their prophecies and their shipping and their building of ships and their building of temples and. That's not English. If someone wrote this for a high school English research paper and had so many ands, they would be marked down.
It's really unnecessarily redundant. Wouldn't they set them off with commas? Wasn't that kind of
Sometimes they set them off with commas. Of course, ancient Hebrew did not have commas. The 2 most common words in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, are and the. The 2 most common words in the Book of Mormon are the same, and the. The and. It's just a Hebrew thing to connect sentences with and.
And just keep going.
And keep going.
And,
Yep.
and see, that was one of those that I read. And this morning, as I was reading through the Book of Mormon, some of the things that are in here, I started to see for myself. And it just helped to kind of crystallize the idea that these are Hebraisms that Joseph Smith would never have known about. Even if he had flat out copied them from the Bible, or at least the style of the Bible, he would have to get lucky on so many points.
Yes, 30 different points.
That's amazing. Now you've brought some.
No way he could have just copied all of these from the Book of Mormon. For example,
From the Bible, you know.
from the Bible.
Yeah.
But one was not even known until the 1950s, when a Jewish scholar whose name is Moses Seidel, he figured out a certain thing in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and he published it. And the article was in Hebrew. Not everyone knows about this, and it's a way the ancients would quote earlier prophets. And when we quote someone, we will say, and President so-and-so or Professor so-and-so said this, and we'll use quote marks, right. And then we'll have a bibliographic footnote. But one way the ancients would do it is they would switch some key words. And I'll just give you one example from the Book of Mormon, and it's there are many in the Book of Mormon, and the example is, let me just make sure I get it right here, so I don't misstate it in front of the camera. Hold on, sorry. All right, here's an example. So Isaiah wrote precept upon precept, line upon line.
Oh,
Isaiah 28.
Yeah.
Precept upon precept, line upon line. So Nephi cited Isaiah, and he switched the key elements. And he said line upon line, precept upon precept.
I was going to say, you're saying it wrong, but...
So that's where you'll switch some key elements, and that's one way they would quote an ancient prophet without saying, and Isaiah said, or Amos said, or Joel said. That's in the Book of Mormon, and a Jewish scholar found it in the 1950s and published it in Hebrew. Now, I introduced this idea to a group of professors a couple of years ago. None of them had heard about it, even as recent as a couple of years ago. So this is astounding. That's a Hebraism.
Yeah. Wow. It's just fascinating to me, because there are people with so many letters and degrees and education from all walks of life and different faiths who come upon these truths within. What is someone like that? Do we know what he said about, do we know if this guy knew anything, Moses Seidel knew anything at all about the Book of Mormon?
No. He was dealing with the Old Testament, strictly the Old Testament, yes.
Yeah.
And so we looked for those examples of those. We call them Seidel's Law, named after him.
For him. Yeah.
And I never met him.
You wouldn't want to call it Moses' law, because that would be the law of Moses.
That's right.
As far as I'm concerned. How many did you find? How many Seidel's laws?
I found maybe 8 or 10. And that's without doing a thorough search. Someone needs to write a book about it, or a master's thesis, or something to see just how many there are in the Book of Mormon.
Just gave some ambitious student perhaps an
idea. I hope
idea.
so.
Boy, they'd get an A right away from you.
That's right, already.
Have you brought any other examples?
Another example of a Hebraism, or Hebrew-like item, are names. There are some Hebrew names in the Book of Mormon that were unknown to the world when Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon. I'll give you one example that I really, really like, and it's the name Alma. Now, when Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon, as you know, the name Alma appears many, many times there. And some of the people who didn't understand the Book of Mormon thought maybe Joseph had borrowed the word Alma from the Latin or the Spanish.
Yes,
Is it also in the Spanish?
Alma means soul.
Soul, yes.
Spirit.
And they thought, okay, he must have borrowed it from the Latin. But the name Alma was discovered in a legal deed in a cave.
You're making this up.
No, south of the Dead Sea Scrolls caves. and it was discovered, and it has the name Alma, the son of Judah, written in Hebrew.
So there
It's
it
a
is.
Hebrew word. Now this letter or deed is dated to around 132 A.D. So it's centuries before Joseph Smith brought forth the Book of Mormon. Centuries. But it's the name Alma, and we know it's a boy's name because it says Alma, the son of Judah.
Oh, that's cool.
It's so fun to look at it in Hebrew.
Well, and there's so many proper names in the Book of Mormon that one reading it for the first time would go, somebody could have made that. Sounds like a silly name, and Gidgidonai, or
Yes.
Abinadab, or
That's right.
and it makes you wonder if you could find have you found other names that also besides Alma?
Two of my scholars have, two of my colleagues have, John Gee and a couple of others have found about 10 or 12 in different seals and documents that came forth after the coming forth of the Book of Mormon. It's just, it's astoundingly wonderful.
It's
powerful. Wow.
James, yeah, you owe me a free
What do I owe you?
Book of Mormon.
Okay, there's one right here.
I know. It's
a first edition.
Wash my hands before I touch it. Yeah. So one of the ones that I really liked, and there's so many that are so cool in here that I had never heard of, and I can't find it right now, but I remember it had to do with cognates or cognate. There it is, cognate verbs and objects. Explain to me what that is, or explain to us.
That's a grammatical form where the noun and the verb are the same root. For example, to build buildings, to dream a dream, to sing a song, to curse with a curse.
Let me remind you of some you've got in here.
Thanks.
Tax with a tax.
Yes.
Fear exceedingly with fear.
Yes.
Shielded by shields, judged righteous judgments, on and on. Now, those are the ones that you found in the Book of Mormon.
Yes. This is very, very Hebrew. That's how they do it in the Hebrew Bible. For example, we'd never say we are taxed with a tax in English.
Doesn't sound right.
No.
It sounds biblical.
Yeah, it's very biblical. And here they are in the Book of Mormon, and they survived the translation into English, showing Joseph Smith was an amazing translator. I mean, he translated by the power of God.
Thank you. I mean, there's 15 or 20 right there.
Yes.
And I read those every day in the Book of Mormon.
Yes.
And now I know, that's how they did it in Hebrew.
Let me tell you one more.
Okay.
And it came to pass. That seems so innocent, and it came to pass, and yet it is a Hebraism. I teach my BYU students, the biblical Hebrew students, that about the third week of the semester. And it came to pass. That is very Hebrew.
It's so ubiquitous in all of the scriptures. But I mean, what makes it so Hebrew, and not because it's worked its way into the English lexicon, at least from a biblical or religious standpoint. So how would I know that really is?
It's found in historical narratives, not so much in poetry. So it's found in Joshua, Judges, Ruth, Chronicles, in those books, not as often in Isaiah or Psalms or Proverbs, the poetry, and it has to do with narrative. This happened, and it came to pass. This happened, and it came to pass. This happened. Very Hebrew.
Yeah, not exactly 19th century North American English. That's awesome. All right, what else can you share with me? I mean, I've read all these ones in the book, but I know you have so many more too.
There's one that I just found fascinating, and that deals with the ancient prophets like Ezekiel and Isaiah and Jeremiah. They would act out or dramatize a prophecy. For example, Ezekiel the prophet was told by the Lord, cut your hair and cut your beard, and then divide the hair into 3 parts. And Ezekiel did that, and everyone probably thought, that is super strange. What is our prophet doing? He's cutting this. And then Ezekiel took a knife and stabbed 1/3 of the hair. He took, threw 1/3 into fire, and the third he threw up into the wind. And it's a prophecy that he dramatized, And here's what it represented. He was prophesying that Israel, 1/3 would be scattered to the winds like his hair, 1/3 would be destroyed by fire, and 1/3 would be killed by the sword. We have dramatic prophecies in the Book of Mormon. And one example is a very famous example, but we overlook it, and that is when the title of liberty. A lot of people think Moroni was just carrying the title of liberty and everyone follow him. But there's a passage, and it's found in Alma 46, verse 23. Let us remember to keep the commandments of God, or our garments shall be rent by our brethren, just like the title was rent, and we be cast into prison, or be sold, or be slain. So see, that was a dramatic action, and then he applied it. It's that's another book of that's another item in the Book of Mormon. We have the Book of Mormon is filled with Hebraic forms and Hebrew-like structures and poetry. We haven't even talked about the poetry. And it's the Book of Mormon came out of the ancient world. Lehi and his wife and Nephi and others were Hebrew speakers, Hebrew readers.
It makes sense.
Yes.
It makes sense. Yeah, the Book of Mormon begins in Jerusalem. Jeremiah is a peer, if you will. I mean, all of those things that we're reading in the Pentateuch or whatever the first 5 are. I mean, it makes sense that you would find those. I'm so glad you guys, your ilk, do this kind of work, because I'm sure there's so many people who are just thinking, man, 30 or more Hebraistic comparisons to other ancient Hebrew writings, such as the Bible,
yes,
is so significant.
Very significant. And when I read the Book of Mormon, I rejoice when I see that it's an ancient text, came out of the ancient world. I rejoice that so many Hebrew-like structures and expressions and poetic passages. Again, I'm astounded.
Yeah.
I'm astounded with Joseph Smith absolutely, certainly translated the Book of Mormon by the power of God.
Thank you so much, Don. It's so meaningful to me that I'm here with you. You know your business. You've done the homework. If you weren't a member of the church, you could say unequivocally, these things are real. These connections are true. But to be able to add to that your own spiritual witness, which ultimately is what's going to get you where you need to be, is just fantastic, and very gracious of you to be here with us. Thank you so much.
It's a privilege. And please let me just add this. Far more consequential than Hebraisms are these 3 things about the Book of Mormon. 1, it's Jesus Christ focused. It really is. 2, you can know of its truthfulness by the power of the Holy Ghost. And 3, it changes lives. It's a life-changing work.
Amen.
I brought a very important quote by our prophet, our beloved prophet, President Nelson. And he said the Book of Mormon is rich with Hebraisms. That's a quote.
He did.
He said that. And he talks about Hebraisms too. I want everyone to know that Hebraisms constitute yet another significant evidence of the antiquity of the Book of Mormon, that it did come forth out of the Jerusalem Hebrew speaker world.
I love that. Well, Don, once again, thank you so much. This has been really an honor. And even though I didn't know anything about you until I read this book last night, I want to know so much more. And I know that I can find more of your studies and research, and just really, really appreciate it. This is so great to be able to continue to amass this evidence. Thanks so much.
What a privilege and opportunity. Thank you.
You got it.